I'm Pamela Thomas and I'm here today to speak about the death of my brother James. James Cameron, he was 41 years old and he died on the 5th of October 2021 in Nine Wells Hospital. And she says, Pamela, they've told me I've got to get the family and that, James is going to die. And they says to me, no, he couldn't speak. I said, so how did you manage to have on a ventilator then? Can you speak? And it's Pamela, are you alone? Are you sitting down? Have you got someone with you? And he says to me, it's James, Pamela, he's gone. And I just hung the phone up. I was like, you didn't resuscitate my brother. The amount of fluid, because he's like, his neck was on his face. He was like blew right up and stuff, and they'd also put him on a trial. So it was a randomised trial. I didn't know the names or anything at that point in time because I had no access to his medical records at this point. And then I went through them and I found that my brother was enrolled in a trial, randomised control trial, and that trial withheld antibiotics. See, the way the handwriting was, it was a scribble. I had my brother's driver's licence with his signature on it. That wasn't my brother's signature, that was a study investigator, Paul Lawson's signature, that signed my brother's name. I'm Pamela Thomas and I'm here today to speak about the death of my brother James. James Cameron, he was 41 years old and he died on the 5th of October 2021 in Nine Wells Hospital. He originally went to hospital and it was the 17th of September. He went to hospital, he had dehydration and diarrhoea. My son took him to the hospital because he was obviously unwell and he needed seen to. It's not a place he would usually go or anything like that, but he needed a wee bit of help. He couldn't get a hold of any NHS 24s or anything like that. So my son says, I'll just drive him up to the hospital. So he did. When he arrived there, he got told, I'm sorry, we can't see your uncle. We're dealing with a boy who's a teenager who's got a broken ankle. This was a nurse in the A&E department, and my son was quite adamant, no, look, you're going to have to see my uncle. He's here, he's not well. And so he went outside and there was paramedics and ambulances outside, and he went out and spoke to them and says, look, can you come over and see my uncle? He's been in his bed for a week, he's not well, he's dehydrated, and he was kind of gaunt looking, and he was a bit disorientated and stuff. So the paramedics and that said no. So my son eventually had to phone 999 for outside the hospital, and it was a call handler that said, look, just stay where you are. I'm going to phone into the hospital and I'm going to get somebody to come out, which they did. And at that point in time, we thought, great, I wasn't there. It was my son and my brother that was there. But I thought, great, he's going to get seen to. So he goes away in, and within a couple of hours, we were told, got a phone call. It was my brother's ex-partner at the time. She phoned me first and says to me, Pamela, that she'd phoned the hospital to see what was going on. And she says, Pamela, they've told me I've got to get the family and that James is going to die. And I can just remember it was hysterical. It was, greeting and what do you mean? I remember I was just running back and forward in my garden, and I'd phoned my dad, and he was away down in Leicester at the time, and I phoned my wee brother. He was down Glasgow. Phoned the hospital obviously as well. I was on one phone in Perth. His ex-partner was on another phone. She'd phoned him for St Andrews. My brother was on the phone for Glasgow. Because when I got his medical records, I could see that they were all kind of talking to us at the same time, different doctors and that. So it went for kind of there. He ended up in the hospital. He ended up in high dependency unit after a couple of hours, then ended up in intensive care unit. He was put on a CPAP hood thing. So it was like a hood thing that went over him, and it was meant to blow oxygen and that into him. But he was still communicating with me on messages and that. So, I was like, you all right, brother, and what's going on? He was very limited in what he was saying to me. But the communication was there. Over the course of the weekend, I'd got onto a ventilator, but it wasn't the weekend, that happened after that. I obviously knew, for previously, about things, people going in hospitals and about all the stories about ventilators and stuff like that. because they'd said on the phone about ventilation and stuff like that, my brother would maybe have to go on a ventilator. And I said, no, he's not going on a ventilator. So they then gave him something over the course of that weekend. I think it was the Monday night. They gave him something to make him sleepy, but they didn't tell me that at the time. And I knew because communication with him became non-existent. And I thought if he's eating and communicate with me and that, they can't put him on any ventilators. So then what happened was the Monday night, early hours of the Tuesday morning or something, it was they put my brother right on a ventilator. Phoned me up the following day, says to me that my brother was struggling and he'd asked to be put on a ventilator. Asked for help. So I asked him, did he have any messages for like his sons? Like tell them I love them, just a basic thing like that. And they says to me, no, he couldn't speak. I said, so how did he manage to ask to go on a ventilator then if he couldn't speak? So it was just automatic. I said that, do you know what I mean? Because I knew that he would never have asked that, you know what I mean? So, he was in a hospital for about 3 weeks. I joined a ventilator survivor group on Facebook and I was learning about the names of the medications like the sedation, the paralysis and stuff like that, because they were telling me he was on this paralysis, but that can affect his blood pressure and put it low. And so I was finding out these things for there. I wasn't communicating with anybody, but I was taking the things that I needed to that were important back to the hospital, phoning up 4 times a day, asking them questions, telling them that I wanted them off this paralysis medication and stuff like that. And 3 weeks later, I got a phone call. No, it was the Sunday before my brother died on the Tuesday, the 5th of October. It was a Sunday. I'd done a video call, and I'd been trying to video call for tea time. They kept putting off. And eventually at 5 to 12 at night, I'd say to my wee boy, look, you just go to your bed, because he used to play some music on the video calls for me, for my brother to hear. I says, you go to your bed, son, you've got school tomorrow. I'm going to wait up. I'm not going to bed until they let me see him. So eventually they let me see him, and when I seen him, I understand now why they were putting it off, because his face was swollen, red raw. It was like a balloon going to pop, and I was like, look at the state of him, what's the matter with him, what's going on? The following day, on the Monday, I got a phone call to say at lunchtime, don't be concerned about the state of his face. That's nothing to be concerned about. He's got COVID lungs, only COVID lungs. So I was kind of put in my place. It was a different doctor phoned me that day. I was put in my place, but obviously I was like, right, okay then. That Monday there was a blackout on the WhatsApp and like video calling. You couldn't do it if you Google it. It's the 4th of October. You couldn't use any of these messaging things to do video calls. So I never got to see him on the Monday. Tuesday morning, I phoned up the 5th of October. I phoned up at 8:30 in the morning. I said, right, I've not seen any scans, any x-rays. I don't know what's going on. I'm concerned about my brother. Can you send me everything that you've done through like an email? They told me no, for data protection. Unbeknown to me at that time that didn't really matter, because I was his next of kin and he was sedated and paralysed, so it should have came to me, that information. So I told them at 8:30 in the morning, I says, well, if you can't send me, I'm going to get ready and I'm going to come through and I want to see one of these face to face, because I hadn't been allowed to see him, hadn't been allowed to visit him, touch him, sit with him, anything like that. I wasn't allowed in the hospital at all. So 10 to 10 that morning, an hour and a half later, just over an hour and a half later, I got a phone call, Pamela, and I knew. And I says to him, just fucking tell me. Sorry for swearing. I say, just fucking tell me. And he's, Pamela, are you alone? Are you sitting down? Have you got someone with you? And he says to me, it's James, Pamela, he's gone. And I just hung the phone up. And obviously I phoned my dad and that, let him know. And then later on that afternoon, the doctor phoned me back and asked me if I had any questions. And I asked him, I wanted to know about resuscitation and that, you see them using the pads and bring people back in, because they said they had a cardiac arrest. And they says, so I was listening to what happened, and they never told me that they used any of that. So I was like, you didn't resuscitate my brother. And then he told me that I could go through and see my brother if I wanted to, only after he died. So I did. I took him up on that offer, and it was about tea time. My son's girlfriend came and got me, went and got his ex-partner and that. We went to the hospital, and my brother was lying there, and it was just horrific. His lips were swollen like bananas, and his two eyeballs were swollen, like tennis balls. And it just didn't feel like it was my brother that was there. And then someone wasn't sitting right with me. I spoke to the consultant outside, and I says to him, I want a post-mortem done, because I thought, did he have an allergic reaction? Is that why he was all swollen? So I says, I want a post-mortem done. And he says that he would contact the Crown Office and stuff like that. This was at tea time, remember, on the 5th of October. He said he would contact the Crown Office, but that ultimately that decision lay with them. So I then find out that they had contacted the Crown Office at 11 o'clock in the morning that my brother died, 10 minutes after he died. For whatever reason, I don't know. But they said that they could confirm his death, and it was a SARS-CoV-2 is the only thing that's on his death certificate. I then refused to take my brother. I phoned the Crown Office myself. I refused to take my brother out of the hospital. I says, I'm not taking him out. I want a post-mortem. So it was, his birthday would have been on the 13th of October, and it was the 12th of October. I eventually went to a funeral directors and says to them, look, can I get a funeral organised for my brother? I'd been to the Crown, I'd been to MPs and stuff. I wasn't getting anywhere, I wasn't getting a post-mortem, I wasn't getting any support. So eventually I says, right, I started to feel a bit guilty in that for leaving him, in the hospital. And I says, right, okay, I'll go and get him. So the funeral directors had made an arrangement to go and get him, and they were going to get him on his birthday, which was the 13th of October. And I asked them not to get in touch with me that day because I had an appointment for the 14th. I asked them not to get in touch with me on his birthday. I didn't want to speak about funerals or anything on his birthday. But they phoned me 9 o'clock that morning when they went to get him on his birthday, and they says, look, we know you've got an appointment later on tomorrow evening. Can you come in earlier, first thing? And I just thought nothing of it, till I got there. And then I very quickly realised they asked me, have you got a photo of your brother? And I showed them a photo of my brother, and then they were asking me questions about him, if he was on any medication.
So was this the undertaker?
Yeah. Started asking me questions. So I'm no daft. I very quickly established that I was being questioned. And I had my son with me and my sister, and I could see my son was a bit like, the funeral director stated that they had a forum, and usually a cremation form 4 or something they called it. And what used to happen is if the funeral directors had a issue with the cause of death, then they would tick this box. So he says to me, but they've done away with the forums. So my son, I seen him starting to, and I knew, I says, James, if this is just getting a bit much for you or whatever, you have to go. Just go outside and I'll deal with this, because I knew there was something going on, and it was important. I says to the funeral director, you've been dealing with these COVID deaths and people and all that, have you had anybody like my brother? So it was important I held that conversation in the flow that it was going, so that, because I knew something wasn't right, and this was the only other professional that had ever met me anywhere. Not that I'd even asked him to. This happened off the back in a book in a funeral, and him getting my brother and seeing the state my brother was in. So he says to me he would have ticked that box. He would have ticked that box to say that he had a concern. So then I went back to the Crown Office. I went to Health Improvement Scotland, and they had said to me that there was a Dr. Peter Wiggins that said that I could get a post-mortem private for £1,500, but it would be a 3-week delay. So I was like, brilliant. He says to me, but the Crown need to direct you to get that. So I says, okay then, off back to the Crown I went. And the Crown were saying to me, no, Health Improvement Scotland's giving you the wrong information. So back to Health Improvement Scotland, look, Crown are saying you're giving me the wrong information, what is it? Back to the Crown Office. So I was just kind of getting passed back and forward anyway. Ended up I never got a post-mortem, went ahead with the funeral. Prior to that, I'd been to the police station, and before I took my brother out of the hospital as well, and reported his death straight away the day after he died. I think it was a couple of days later they gave me an appointment to go in, and I went in. but I didn't have access to his medical records or anything. And then all I had to go on was the state he was in when I seen him, the red swollen face, the amount of fluid, because he's like, his neck was on his face. He was like blew right up and stuff. And they'd also put him on a trial. So it was a randomised trial. I didn't know the names or anything at that point in time because I had no access to his medical records at this point. It wasn't until the November I got them. So I was giving the police a statement on just what I knew at that time. Anyway, got the medical records. Police never done anything. They took my statement, but never went any further. Went ahead with the funeral, got the medical records, and then I went through them and I found that my brother was enrolled in a trial, randomised control trial, and that trial withheld antibiotics. I also found that wasn't my brother's signature who's signed. It was a study investigators. It was clearly, you could see the way the handwriting was, it was a squiggly way. I had my brother's driver licence and his signature on it. That wasn't my brother's signature. That was a study investigator, Pauline Austin's signature, that signed my brother's name and excluded him for getting antibiotics and put him into this trial. I then went through the medical records and I found out they had ventilator-associated pneumonia. I found out they had like MRSA, haemophilus influenza, stenomatosis metafolia. And then, so I was having to Google all these names and what they were, and when I was putting them in, it came up about Queen Elizabeth Hospital and Millie Main and that dying with these infections in the Queen Elizabeth. And I think they were like water kind of infections for their taps or drains or whatever. So I'm automatically thinking, well, how can my brother have all these killing infections and there can be like inquiries into them in the Queen Elizabeth, but not in Nine Wells? How many other people have died with them and got them infections? Bearing in mind, none of them are mentioned on his death certificate. I also got the funeral directors to weigh him and weigh the coffin in it, and there was a 4 stone weight gain, so it was fluid. So he just bulged right up. I had to take photographs of him, pull hair at his head, with no drains, no attempt to put any drains in to take the fluid off him. And his face was mangled. His face was a mess, you know, and that's what his wee boy had to see for the last time. That's the image it'll haunt him. My dad also, you know, our siblings, that was the last image of him, the state that he was in. And that's what my dad says when he sees him. He says, what have they done to you, son? So, so that's where it all then kind of really began. So I was going back to the hospitals for meetings and stuff like that, recording them. I'd kept a diary the whole time James was in as well, about every time I called, what date and time and stuff like that, and what his oxygen was at, all that kind of stuff. I then tried to go back to the police. I then joined the COVID inquiry, the Scottish COVID inquiry. I gave evidence there. I was doing things like podcasts, doing anything, you know, just to try and keep this out there, what had happened with my brother. And eventually, you know, through people were contacting me and asking me questions about my brother, and asking if I had got his medical records. And it was a man from England, actually. I believe he's like an ex-barrister or something like that. He'd got in touch with me, and he managed to get a hold of my brother's medical records with given my permission, and he sent them off to like a friend or a colleague or someone of his who happened to be a consultant with over 30 years experience, and he done a report for me, which I was then able to take back to the Crown Office. I'd sent hundreds and hundreds of emails to the Crown Office. And even with regards to the signature and stuff, I told the inquiry, look, this is the signature carry on, this is criminal. And the inquiry says, you need to report that to the police. And I went to the police, and the police were telling me to go to the inquiry. So I made the inquiry aware. I was being passed with political post. And when I got this report, it basically says that the normal procedure or protocol for sepsis on arrival at the hospital wasn't followed with my brother. And it was believed that that could have been the cause of my brother's death, and obviously no getting the antibiotics for being in this trial, and that the trial document wasn't filled in properly and it looked like to be not my brother's signature. So I was then able to go to the Crown Office with this, present it to them and say to them, look, which I did, and they then turned and told me it's only initialed, it could be for anybody. So I went back to the guy and I says, look, you know, I've got this, come back to the Crown Office and they're saying it's just initialed, so they're not going to accept it. And lo and behold, the actual consultant passed on his full name, GMC number, all his details, and told me to pass it on to the Crown Office. So I did. Then the Crown Office got back to me and says it because I'd been kind of persistent and for kind of like peace of mind and stuff like that, they were going to send to Crown Council, and if possible, could I then send in my brother's medical records to them. So I done that. So that was back in about maybe October kind of time, October, November. So they've had two-month extensions. They've asked me, can I get a 2-month extension before I get back to you? You know, it'll be another 2 months before I go back to you. So they've done that to me twice now. So I'm just waiting to hear from the Crown. But, and beside all that, you know, I'm just, when things like this are coming up and things, any kind of talks, anything, I'm trying to keep myself out there to keep it from going stale, just so that I can, you know, I don't want it to go stale and just keep applying the pressure.
Unbelievable story. Incredible that we're putting people through this in this day and age. It's just, you think we're United Kingdom or Scotland or health service, and we should be treating people better than this. Now, and I thank you for sharing your story, and I understand why you're doing it, and it must be tough to do it because you must have told that story 100 times, and every time your head's going back to those times and those visions. So I know it must be tough for you, and I can't thank you enough for doing that. Can I ask you a couple of questions about the stuff? See, when your brother went at 9 Miles, that's the big hospital Dundee, isn't it? When he went in there at first, it was because you felt he was dehydrated and he was starting to be lucid and stuff.
Yeah.
Once they got him in, you then get a phone call saying you better get the family here because he's not going to get long to go.
Yeah, but we weren't allowed to go to the hospital. It was his ex-girlfriend that told me that. She says to me she'd phoned up the hospital and they'd told her. So then...
So why were you not allowed to go to the hospital? Was it because of COVID regulations at the time? Right. So what was the diagnosis of your brother at that point? What did they say was wrong with him?
SARS-CoV-2. Done a test and it was SARS-CoV-2.
So COVID?
COVID, aye.
Wow.
So that's what they said. They said that was...
I know that was just told me it was on the death certificate. I'm thinking that doesn't sound like, I mean...
Yeah, so that's what they came back with. That's what they came back with. That was the only thing that was wrong with my brother. But when I also read his records, there was all these other infections that obviously he ended up with when he was in there. Even a couple of days before he died, they were testing him for TB. You know?
Now, I'm a layman. I'm not learned in anything other than common sense logic, and a bit of the time I've been on this earth's been a fair few years now, over half a century. But if there was only two people left in the world and it was me and you, and everybody else had died through whatever, and I for some reason found out you were no well and it was causing infections, the first thing I'd look for would be the stuff that they barred your brother for getting.
The antibiotics?
Aye.
Yeah.
If you've got, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any medical training.
Yeah.
And if you were in one of these Last Day on Earth movies,
yeah,
and you were, and we need to get her, she's no well, right? She's got an infection. I know she's got an infection. I need to get some of these.
Antibiotics, yeah.
But the first thing I'd look for.
Absolutely.
But your brother's in 9 Wells, the biggest hospital in that area,
No antibiotics.
And somebody wanted them to have no antibiotics. Yes. That kind of beggars belief.
I think in the report that doctor submitted, that there was some kind of discussion. Somebody was saying to start antibiotics and somebody else never. So, but it didn't happen.
And you're led to believe that your brother opted into a trial to not have antibiotics.
Yeah.
But your brother, when he went in, was an old man.
He was going there for help.
Aye, it was not a nice place.
So he was going to have a trial and go on a trial that meant he get no help, he got some vitamin C.
Now, See, when your brother went into the hospital, that's the last you seen of him, unfortunately.
No, I wasn't there. I never seen him for up to a week before that.
You didn't see him when he was at his worst before going into hospital?
I spoke to him every day on the phone.
Right.
So I was unwell myself. So I was phoning him, I was sleeping and that. So in between that, I was giving him a wee phone call. How you doing, brother? You all right? And he was, it's a diarrhea, Pamela.
So who was the last person to see him then, your son?
My son.
When he drove him there?
He took him
And
in.
how does he describe his condition at that point?
It's kind of hard to say. He says that he was unwell. Do you know what I mean? He was really unwell. He was in the car and it was just kind of like slumped in the motor and stuff like that.
The way I was imagining it, right? Now, again, so that then takes me to where I'm going with that conversation. If your brother was that way, where he was, quite lucid, why would anybody think it'd be a good thing to ask him if he wants to go on a trial? You wouldn't. You would fix that, man.
Well, this is it. What had happened just before it, the reason it ended up going to hospital was I'd got his son stayed through in St Andrews, two of his sons, but one of them was young, one of them was a teenager, older teenager, 17. And I'd says, can you go and check your dad for me, son, make sure he's all right? Because I'd sent him like vitamins and stuff through the post for Amazon parcels, and he'd missed the door a couple of times, and I was getting a ping on my phone to tell me that, he'd missed the delivery. And so I'd asked his boy to go round and check on him. Well, my son did. He asked him, you go and check on your dad. Because my son was telling me I was just being a bit anxious, and I was like, I'm a bit worried. But his mum went with him, and the bairn went to my brother's door, and my brother kind of stumbled or something, and his ex-partner says to me, she phoned me and she says to me, Pamela, you're his sister. I says, what do you mean I'm his sister? She says, well, you need to make, I can't call an ambulance or anything, and there's something all right with him. She says he's either got mental health problems or there's something wrong with him, but he needs help. He's just frightened of the bairn, she says. I said, what do you mean he's just frightened of the bairn? So when I phoned him, I says, James, what's going on? What do you mean? I says, well, you just frightened the bairn. And he's like, did I? So he was a bit no right, do you know what I mean? So I says to my son, look, go and do me a favour, go and go through and check on Uncle James for me, just because, they say, oh, she's anxious. And I thought that. So my son just went straight to the hospital, do you know what I mean? Let's go.
What age is your son at this point, by the way?
James is...
Well, he's obviously a tough lad because he's driving,
he's 20, he's 20, so what are we, 24?
At the time.
24, right.
So he's no a daft young laddie, right? He's seen this condition.
Yeah.
He can see that, my uncle needs some hospital help here. It doesn't sound as if he's in a place physically that he would be making
able to consent to anything anyway, yes. So remember at this point as well, they've then got him onto, so it was the following day that this trial, that he was entered into this trial. So he went on the 17th, and it was on the 18th he was into this trial. And at this point in time, he's on one of these like high flow things. It's like a hairdryer blown. So you're vulnerable. You're scared when you're in the hospital. It's not a place that you want to be, especially after everything you've seen going on with ventilators and deaths, and he's there. He's vulnerable. He's unwell. He's on this, non-invasive ventilation thing, and he's supposed to be able to alone have consent to, and it was a booklet like that.
He wouldn't have been able to read it.
Absolutely not. Even hearing them speaking wouldn't have even been...
Horrific period for you. But now, you obviously are determined to get, I would imagine, justice in some form for your brother, and quite rightly so, and hat off to you for doing that. What does justice look like to you, Pamela?
Now you're asking. I ask myself that all the time too. The truth. I would like maybe like a fatal accident inquiry. Know that I believe for a second it was an accident, but some kind of inquiry into his death to find out what exactly happened and the truth be told, because this shouldn't have happened. Basic antibiotic treatment was withheld for my brother, the most basic, and that was withheld. The signature was forged 100%, and then the lies were told daily. I was never told about any of the infections that he had. And like I say, they were all dangerous within themselves, you know. If you had the flu, that can kill on its own. Sternomatrosis can, you know, the staph infections and all that can. Ventilator-associated pneumonia. Even the on his notes it said COVID pneumonia. Now, pneumonia, you get an antibiotic for pneumonia, do you know?
Horrific. Well, listen, the story, and I'm trying to think the right word to use. I don't think an amazing story is the terminology I should be using, but you understand what I mean by that. It's just incredible that this man had to go through, and he was 41. Well, look, thank you very much for sharing your story with us, Pamela. I'm sure that if there's anybody who's not heard it, will be stunned, shocked about what we've actually done to your brother as a society. It's pretty worrying. And I just hope that you get your version of justice for your brother, and hopefully, I know it sounds probably unlikely, it's going by what you've told me so far, but this 2-month extension, I hope you don't just get another one of them. I hope you actually get some sort of, see, when people want to know something, we can kind of accept the truth. The truth, whether we enjoy the version of the truth or not, getting an answer, it's got to be easier, regardless of how horrific the answer is, to having no answers.
Well, this is it. See the weekend before my brother died as well, they removed a penicillin allergy off his notes, off his medical records. It was through it all the way through it, and then that weekend it's had no known allergies.
And did he have a penicillin allergy? As normally through his normal days?
He had a penicillin allergy. So that's why I often say to myself, you know, see if they say to me, Pamela, your brother's unwell. You know, he's got a penicillin allergy, but we need to throw everything at him to try and keep, you know, having that communication, that conversation. You're going to say, throw whatever you can, do what you can to save his life. But when you get these records and you realise you've been talking to these people every single day, and what they've been telling you is lies, withholding the truth for you. Do you know what I mean? Why?
Horrible.
Why?
I'm sure you did comment on this during the film as a story. Was you maybe pulling an attorney at that point? It would just be next of kin. So there was no debate. You're the person that they speak to.
Yeah, and they did speak to me. They had me doing this as next of kin. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know.
And they didn't try to resuscitate your brother as well. That's frightening.
They said he was flatlined, but I mean, if he was hooked up to monitors and all this kind of stuff, would they not get some indication of one? Intensive care.
Right, so he's going to have 2 nurses. So the minute his heart stops,
they should be there.
They're like that window away at the furthest.
Do you know something? We don't even know the proper time he died, because in the notes it's saying one time, and then they're writing beside it with a clock, and it's like the time they're given for the death is, they're writing it like it's beforehand, like it's already happened, and then they're getting other doctors to come and confirm what time when they got beeped at and what time the death happened at. And it is like 5-6 minutes of a difference, but that's a long time. Do you know what I mean? So I don't even know the right time he's dead.
And I know, without even asking you a question, I kind of understand you would have got plenty legal advice since that happened. But I kind of thought that the Crown Office were legally obliged to do investigation of any unusual murder, unusual death.
So this is the other thing too. What they done was they brought out this thing saying that you wanted to report, you didn't need to report any deaths to the Crown Office.
Because of COVID?
Yeah, so they didn't need to report. Now this is really important. They didn't need to report any deaths. But what happened with my brother is I says there's an issue here. You know, he says I'm going to have to report it to the Crown Office. I says absolutely, I want a post-mortem, you report it. But when, like I said, when I got his medical records, it had been reported at 11 o'clock that morning. So why did they report it when it didn't need to be reported?
But why? They still done nothing.
They had concerns, my concerns, because I was asking concerns the day before when he was all swollen, with his face all red, you know, a couple of days before he died. It's the Sunday, I was asking questions, and it seemed to be like that's what they were putting in the report, the referral to the PF, like they did.
Incredible. Listen, Pamela, thanks very much for sharing your story with me. I can't thank you enough. I know every time you do it, it's going to hurt. So, and you've been shouting and doing your brother will be proud of you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
And if I can help you at all with anything going forward, then just let me know. We're always there for you. Thanks very much. All right.
Take care.